reducing our car count to like 10-ish cars a day was much more profitable, manageable, less stressful than close to 20 cars a day. And then it became more meaningful, right? You have more time to talk to your clients. You have more time to get to know your customers, build rapport, review work orders, review DVIs, answer their questions. The rush kind of went out of it.
This is Shop Talk Her Way with JeanAnn SaintGrace.
Do you ever feel like you're playing some version of the blame game every day? Do you feel like there's people looking for answers, there aren't any solutions, and unfortunately, as a shop owner, you're the one holding the bag? Let's talk about the blame game. Let's talk about accountability and responsibility and whose job is whose. Welcome to this episode of Shop Talk Her Way with JeanAnn SaintGrace. I'm so excited to be here with you again. I try to pull my topics from things that are happening with clients. Usually when something's happening for one person, it's probably happening for more than one. So this week, one of the big conversations I was having was around technician productivity and how do we fix that? It was also wrapped up in a team member not meeting the expectations set by the management team. And it was also wrapped up in their pay rate. So there's this like magic soup, right? That hopefully as a shop owner, what numbers do you need to make the profit margin needed to pay your team, to cover your fixed costs, to have profit on the bottom line when that's all said and done. And we should also have goals for our team members to get us to those goals. And for each team member, the goals might be a little different because they all have different roles. They have control over different things. And it kind of becomes murky of whose job is whose. And then when the goals don't get met, there's a lot of finger pointing, oh, it's this person, oh, it's that person. It might be the front versus the back, the top, the shop owner versus the team versus the shop owner, whatever that looks like. There's blame going around when the goals don't get met. And there are consequences when goals don't get met, right? If depending on your pay plan, I hope you're not on flat rate, but if you are, that directly affects the pay for your technicians. If your advisors are working on base plus commission, it hurts them. If you're the owner and you, of course, would like to get paid and there's not enough money to go around, you're going to be the one who's not getting paid. So it's important that we know who's who at the zoo, right? Whose job is it and whose goals are what? So while you might have one overarching goal for weekly sales or car count or average repair order, whatever that looks like, we have to put it in different terms for each of our layer of our team, right? So before we jump into that, let's talk about one of our partners, WorldPac and the WorldPac Training Institute. They have graciously agreed to be the sponsor for this podcast, and I'm so incredibly grateful to them for that. WorldPac was an amazing partner for us when we had our shop, and they continue to be not only an excellent supplier, but also investing in training for our team. I just had the honor of being asked to be an instructor this last week, and I felt like I got to really get in there and play with the big boys, giving a class on how to load out your tech cost, your team payroll costs. And so we had a great attendance and look forward to hopefully doing that in the future. They offer training that is, some of their training is free. It's open to anybody. And all you have to do is go to the WorldPac Training Institute website and look at the classes that are available. So I encourage you both to do business with WorldPac and to check out what's available at the WorldPac Training Institute. So to continue, this conversation was evolving of we hired a technician at a specific rate. We've had him for about 2 months, and he has not once hit his production goal. And the question asked is, what do we do? What do we do? Do we adjust his pay? Do we give him kind of some kind of an ultimatum, or a say, hey, either you've got to do this or else? And I asked the shop owner to fall back a little bit. I asked the shop owner to ask them, are we creating an environment in the shop that is conducive to this technician making his production hours? That's a good question. Are we doing that? And when we started to drill down on that, we found that there were some problems in the workflow process that were not conducive to this technician being able to produce like they're wanting him to. So before we start talking to a technician about pay cuts or anything like that, or any team member, we need to make sure as the owner that we have got processes in place, that they understand the process, that they've been trained on the process, and that they know what's expected of them. Now, there's also a conversation to be had around compensation plans. We need to create compensation plans where their goal, in order for us to have the profit margin that we need on labor, is actually attainable. Because if we as the owner are grinding our teeth every time we're writing a payroll check, not only is that not good for us, it's not good for the culture of the company, and it's not good for the team member to constantly feel like they're failing. So there are a few things I would have done differently during this hire, but that's probably a conversation for another day. But let's talk about whose responsibility is what. So if you think about kind of the layers of your business, of course, the shop owner would be the top layer of responsibility. Ultimately, they're the ones responsible for everything that goes on in the shop. Your service advisor has a next layer of responsibility. They're responsible for bringing in the customers that through marketing, the owner has got to pick up the phone or come in or whatever that might look like. So the shop owner's big goals as far as like daily work is for the standard operating procedures to be in place, for the marketing to be working and manageable and held accountable, whatever marketing, and that it's actually working, that the phones are ringing, there's people coming in. Then the next layer is that the advisors are answering the phones, greeting people, encouraging them to come in, making appointments, offering what we can in order to entice them to come in, building that relationship. Then the technician's job is to execute whatever work is being put in front of them in a timely manner, complete with quality, and also to report back to the advisor whatever the concerns might be. So there's a lot of communication, of course, throughout the shop, but the communication between the advisors and the technicians, I think, is really key. And we all know from personal life experience, right? If you don't have a good relationship with the person you're trying to communicate with, that communication is challenging. There might be undercurrents in the conversation. There might be challenges with tone, with languaging. Sometimes something that's meant innocently can be taken the wrong way. So there's all this static in the atmosphere when a relationship is not clearly delineated and the communication is bad. So if we look at these three layers of responsibility in the shop, the owner really always needs to take a look at their role first. So my question to my shop owner this week, when they said he's not hitting their production, I asked, do we have cars to work on? Yes. Okay. Does the technician know what he's doing right now and what he's doing next and what he's doing after that? And that's where we had a challenge. they've been working on their standard operating procedures to try to smooth out their workflow, but they have not yet put into place the piece where every technician knows exactly what they're doing next. And if the techs don't know that, then they're either going to the advisor saying, "Hey, what do I do next?" They might be wandering around the shop not knowing what to do. And that can be super frustrating, right? That can be, not knowing where you're going next is one of the fundamental challenges of a human being. Human beings need to know, how am I doing and what's next? So what I encouraged my shop owner to do was to get this workflow process into alignment so that we had a clear way of dispatching work to the technicians, which would then just allow them to pull a ticket, go do the work on that, do whatever documentation was necessary, give it back to the advisor, and then move on to the next and the next and the next and the next. And we can't really fault the technician if they're wandering around wondering what's next. If the person they're reporting to either is busy on the phone, can't help them, then how are they being directed? And they might have to stand around, they might have downtime. And the key to productivity, of course, is keeping them moving, keeping them engaged in the work that they're doing. There's enough places where time can be lost between diag, between moving cars in and out, between waiting for parts or, getting wrong parts and not knowing it until the car's apart in the bay. And then now there's a mad scramble to get the right part. Or now we've completely put them into stasis on that project until the new parts get there and they have to move on. Again, do they know what's next? So I was trying to impart, and hopefully I did it more eloquently than I think I did, that this is a key part of the business, right? But we all know that it's not just the technician's challenge, right? When we look at the service advisor piece of our organization, in my opinion, and it's my opinion, so forgive me if I'm rubbing anybody the wrong way, but the service advisor has one of the most challenging positions in the shop environment. And the reason is that everything kind of falls towards them. In reality, your service advisor or advisors, the advising department, is the hub of the business, right? And so the owner's looking at the advisors for certain KPIs. The technicians are looking to the advisors to tell them how are they doing and what's next. And then you've got this other pressure on them because they are the ones who are having to translate everything in the shop to the customer. And so there's kind of this weird pinch point around your advising group if you have more than one, or your advisor, because they're the ones that keep everything moving. They are, dispatching to techs, they're scheduling customers, they're doubling down on their KPIs, making sure their gross profit margins are correct. They have a lot of responsibility. And unfortunately, according to one of my gurus at World Pack Training Institute, they are the least trained group of employees in the shop environment. And I would argue that not only do your advisors need to be trained in sales, be trained in customer relations, be trained in the psychology of buying, of being service first, of being hospitable, of approaching every client as though they're a fresh experience and they have to leave anything that just happened, whatever it might be, whatever engagement they just had, they have to come to this next engagement with the client or the customer fresh. So it's challenging, right? And I've done this job. So I know how it is. I know how it is to spend your whole day moving from one project to the next project to the next project and then doubling back and then moving forward and having to constantly assess and reassess exactly where you're at in order to move forward, because you get interrupted because the phone rings, you get interrupted because the tech needs a clarification, you get interrupted because your vendor shows up, you have interruption because you got the wrong part. Whatever the interruption is, it's like the advisor has to stop, assess, and reassess their position every time something happens. And in a fast-paced environment like a shop, when there's so many moving parts, it's exhausting. Like, let's be frank. And there were days when I would look around my office and be like, I know from the time I opened the door till the time we closed the door, I moved my feet, I did all the things, but I have no idea what I did. And the only measure of my daily experience was the stack of invoices that was sitting on my desk at the end of the day, because they'd gone from estimate to invoice, right? And that's sometimes a hard thing to do, because that's basically wash, rinse, and repeat. That it doesn't really matter how many cars we moved, how much, what kind of car it was. None of that really matters, because all we had at the end of the day was a stack of invoices that are complete. And is there accomplishment in that? Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. The accomplishment is in not only the cars that we moved, and it's not always the number of cars that we moved, it's the quality of the jobs that we completed. Did we hit our average repair order? Did we hit our hours per ticket? Did we, did everything run smoothly? Did we have all the parts we needed? Did we keep the customers informed? Did we do all those things? And sometimes it's easy to lose sight of everything you did right when a couple of things went wrong. So, there were often times, and I'm extra bad at this, but I kick myself on a regular basis of, did I do everything I could? Should I have made that phone call 2 minutes sooner or 2 minutes later? Should I have ordered those parts before I made that phone call? And, there are shops, some of them, and ours was one of them, where our parts supply was a long way away from us. Our primary supplier was over an hour away from us, and they delivered to us 4 times a day, but you had to hit those trucks or you were behind. And so it was a constant, again, where am I and what am I doing? How am I doing? And what's next? So, ordering parts in timing and getting authorizations and having your work scheduled properly. These are all the moving parts that the advisor has to handle. Now, am I saying a technician's job is easy? I am not. I don't think there's a quote unquote easy job in the shop unless you've got somebody whose job is to clean. Then, for the most part, if the floors are clean, the benches are clean, the parts are in order, whatever, that might be an easier job than the rest of it. But if you're one of the main players, there's really no easy role in the shop. And I don't say that to dissuade anybody. It's it's the toughest job you'll ever love, right? Because if you love working on cars and you're the person who gets a thrill out of finishing a puzzle, and you've taken it apart and put it back together, and at the end it was better than it was before, that's where your approval comes from. That's where your payoff is. If you're an advisor, what's your payoff? My payoff was I got through the day. Maybe nobody was upset with me. Nobody yelled at me. We got all the cars done on time, and everybody's gone and paid for that was supposed to be gone and paid for. That in a lot of ways was my accomplishment. Some of it was just that maybe I got to eat lunch that day, and everything else was an S show, right? And so there's this place where when we start to point fingers, that's where the challenges come. And I talked a little bit about, KPIs, and those are key performance indicators. Sorry, I need to be careful about my alphabet soup, but our key performance indicators. And like I said, every layer of the shop has a different set of KPIs. So to back up a little bit, as I said, the owner's KPI really is car count. The owner needs to put enough marketing out there or have a good enough marketing plan that we have enough cars every week for the team to work on. Now, the advisor has a little bit of that also because they need to know what the car count goal is, and then they need to be able to schedule appropriately. And depending on your work mix, this can be challenging, right? How many oil changes are we going to do? How many state inspections are we going to do? How many diags do we bring in a day? How many check engine lights is too many? And I would argue that if you're a shop trying to do 5 cars a day, one diag is enough. The rest should be straightforward mechanical stuff. If you're a bigger shop and it's 10 cars a day and you've got 2 really good diag techs, maybe it's 2. But we have to be really careful of our workflow and our work mix, and helping as an owner, helping our advisors or working with our advisors and our team to sit down and be like, okay, how many of this kind of job can we handle a day? How many of this job can we handle a day? And I'll tell you, one of the biggest epiphanies I had when I started with my coach when we owned our shop was this. And this sounds absolutely nutty to me. So, but this is what we did. We had, we tried to schedule between 4 and 6 waiter oil changes a day. We scheduled between 8 and 12, we were in California, smog inspections a day. And then we filled in with the bigger stuff. Now, if you start to do that math, we're looking at 15, 16 cars a day. And me service advising, my husband being shop foreman lead tech, and him doing service advising, that was a lot of writing. That was a lot of writing. And there was no room to grow those jobs. Everything pretty much had to be rescheduled. If we did an oil change and found brakes metal to metal, unless the customer could leave it overnight, we were rescheduling that. And that it was lunacy. So when we started with coaching, and they started to talk to us about our average repair order, because you can imagine what our average repair order looked like with that many cars moving through. It was trash. I'm just going to tell you, it was probably under $100, and that was absolute chaos. So we pulled back, and we set it down to, one waiter in the morning, one waiter in the afternoon, basically when our lube guy first came in and when he came back from lunch. And then we started scheduling like 2 smogs in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. So that was like 4 to 6 standalone cars, and then we would fill in with the other stuff. We would do drop-off oil changes because those could grow. We started getting into really having a maintenance mindset and selling maintenance, and it included adding a DVI to our process, reducing our car count to like 10-ish cars a day was much more profitable, manageable, less stressful than close to 20 cars a day. And then it became more meaningful, right? You have more time to talk to your clients. You have more time to get to know your customers, build rapport, review work orders, review DVIs, answer their questions. The rush kind of went out of it. So if you're a shop that's struggling with building customer relations, you might be looking at how many cars are you trying to move through there every day, and should we start looking for quality repair orders over quantity? But it is the shop owner's job through marketing to drive cars into the bays. Then what is the responsibility as far as key performance indicators or goals for the advisors? For the advisors, again, car count, they need to know how to schedule. They also have a responsibility for gross profit margin, because they're the ones writing the service and bidding the jobs. And it's nice now that most of your shop management systems have either a per job or per ticket gross profit margin. And if you have everything set up right, and if you have hear me clearly, the loaded tech costs in your shop management system, you can get a much better idea of gross profit per job there. And having your matrix set right, which again is your owner's responsibility. The owner should set the matrixing and then allow the advisor to execute it. The advisor's job is also to drive hours per ticket, and then that should lead to sales. What is your technician's responsibility? Your technician team would be your DVI completion rate. And again, the advisor is also part of that because he should be assigning, if you're doing DVIs, my goal is 100%, and that's a conversation for another day. But I feel like every car that comes through should get some level of inspection. And I have some caveats to that. I think we should have kind of mini inspections if we're not lifting the vehicle, or if we're bringing a car in that's just been in. But let's face it, a fluid leak can start anytime, a tire can go low anytime, a bulb can go out anytime. So anytime a vehicle's been out of our custody, I think it's inherent that we do another DVI or a courtesy check if you're doing it on paper. Same. But executing those DVIs properly, good notes, good recommendations, good thorough inspections, informing, inspect and inform, not going on field trips or fishing trips when you're doing the DVI. The purpose of the DVI is just to inspect and inform. If there's something that needs more investigation, then that is given back to the advisor to sell more time for investigation, not to do the investigation during the DVI. Then that helps if the DVIs are good and we're recommending maintenance and we're recommending timely repairs, then that helps drive hours per ticket and production hours. The most control that a technician has is in their production hours. If the workflow is proper, if the workflow process, the dispatching is all good, and there's a solid system that's reliable, and they know what they're doing right now and what they're doing next, and hopefully what they're doing after that. And a way also to communicate that, oh, hey, we moved this car out of your queue into somebody else's queue. And there are all kinds of schemes that work for that, whether it's an internal Slack channel, notes within the shop management system. Hey, Bob, we moved that car out of your queue and put it over into Joe's, whatever that looks like. That kind of communication is what's necessary to keep the work flowing through the shop. So the techs really have the control over their production hours if that is the case. So again, everybody needs to know what they're responsible for, and their KPIs need to be fluid with the work that they're doing. Telling a technician we need X amount of hours per ticket, or we need an average repair order of this much, they don't have control over pricing. They don't have control over markup. They only have control over how quickly and efficiently they can get work done. And they're going to get stuck sometimes, right? It's going to happen. And we have to also know, whose responsibility is it? If we get into a job and a bolt breaks, okay, was that on us, or is that the condition the vehicle came in? And we have to figure that out. And if we have a problem like that, the most important thing is communication. The most important thing is for the tech to go to the advisor and say, hey, I've got a problem. This is going to tie this car up. We might need it overnight. We need to let the customer know. We also might need to let the customer know if there's more expense involved, more cost to them. And we've got to be in our integrity. We need to be transparent. We need to tell them either, yeah, we broke it, or no, it was seized. We're in bad weather conditions where things rust, whatever the situation might be. We need to take responsibility for it, or we need to explain why it's not, it wasn't our fault, and go forward with it. So, you all know, as shop owners, as technicians, as advisors, there's so many ways that things can go sideways, but we need to all, every single one of us, take responsibility for our actions. So in my case earlier, where we have a technician who isn't making his production hours, the question is, do we have enough cars? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, then advisor, are we using the workflow process that we've set out? And are we dispatching to this technician by his skill level? And those are all incumbent on us before it gets to the technician. If Joe is maybe taking too many smoke breaks, or if he's on his cell phone, or he's distracted because there's something going on at home, or his toolbox is on the opposite end of the world from where he's working, maybe our shop isn't laid out efficiently, and we need to reevaluate how our shop is laid out to give them more efficiency. So before we start blaming techs, have we done all the things to give them the keys to success? And before we start blaming advisors, have we given them what they need? And there's all kinds of ways to hold people accountable. And it should always be done with respect, with clear communication. And as anything else, they need to have something written in front of them, or somewhere they can see it, where they can see their progress. So if you need to have a progress board, if you need a whiteboard with a thermometer on it, and the total hours of the shop are updated every day and it's reviewed in a morning huddle, or the techs have a way to look into the shop management system and see how many hours they've produced that week. The advisor should have access to all of that information and be able to look on a regular basis and see, what's my gross profit margin? How many cars have we done this week? What's my average repair order? And we also have to remember, as owners, when we start parsing this information, the information that we get out of our shop management systems is only as good as the information that goes into it. And looking at advisor performance, sometimes the way our shop management systems are registering information doesn't give them a chance. If they're writing estimates for vehicles that aren't even in the shop yet, and those estimates don't get sold, and we're tracking average repair order and average written repair order, so average estimates written, those estimates, if the car is not in the shop, have zero chance of being sold that week. Or if we're so busy that vehicle can't come until next week, we're holding them accountable for estimates they wrote that there was no way we could have gotten done this week because of the workload that we had. So yeah, if an advisor writes $1,000 worth of estimates for a vehicle that's not coming into the shop until next week, it's going to hurt his conversion rate if we're tracking that. And I'm a little on the fence about conversion rate. I think that's one we've got to take with a big grain of salt because of challenges like this. And if we have a comeback, or if we have a warranty issue that wasn't our fault, right? We're going to be looking at that advisor's going to be writing a certain amount of estimate that's going to have a $0 value at the end of the week. And so we've got to really parse the numbers. We have to look at how many $0 tickets. We have to look at how the shop management system is calculating average repair order, conversion rate, average written repair order. Because I think sometimes, although, I'm sure that the manufacturers or the programmers are doing their very best, they're not taking into account these kinds of real world situations. And then shop owners are holding their people accountable to numbers that might not be 100% correct. And that concerns me, because then there's all this down pressure on the advisors, on the tech teams to do better. But the problem is that the numbers in the shop management system aren't as good as they should be. And I'm not going to call out one software over another, because not one of them is perfect. Not one of them gives you all the information you need all the time. And we've got to find ways to work around it to make the KPIs that we get out of our systems better. And sometimes we're using vocabulary and they're using different vocabulary. I found one system that what I call productivity, they call efficiency. And I was continually like frustrated with what the heck are we talking about and why are we so far off? And it was because we were talking about two different things. Or we talking about the same thing and calling it two different things and I was looking at the wrong number, but it still wasn't the correct number. So what I'm saying is before we go pointing fingers, we need to know whose responsibility is and what accountability we have in place and that our processes are working for the people who are under those processes. And I encourage you also that not one of your processes should be written in stone. I think it's valuable if you're doing team huddles or team meetings, team lunch and learns, whatever that looks like, that on occasion you review your standard operating procedures to make sure that they're correct. Something could have changed in the shop. You could have gotten a new piece of equipment, or you could have changed your shop management system and now that SOP doesn't work. Or, something in the vehicle realm has changed and now we need to change our SOP to match that. All of these things come into play. And anytime our KPIs start to drift away from where they are, we can't just immediately go to someone and point the finger. We need to investigate the cause, and then accountability comes next. And definitely not blame, right? I think when we start to throw blame around, it creates a lot of static in the field. And like I said before, communication's hard enough when you have a clear field, when everybody's working in the same direction, everybody's on the same page, and everybody's working as a team. Communication is still probably the number one challenge in any shop. And then we start to add the static of drama or blame or feeling like one person's getting this and not getting that, or vice versa, or this part of the team's hurting this part of the team. And there's all this static in the field that just makes it that much harder. So, also as an owner, creating an open space, and I'm a big fan of one on ones, and I will continue to be a big fan on one-on-ones, so that when you bring a team member into the envelope or a container of a one on one meeting, they feel safe, they feel able, and they feel empowered to say, hey, boss, this isn't working and we need to fix it. And not like blame, but honestly, I've looked at this, I'm concerned, I don't think this is working. And encourage them to come to you with a solution. Ask them, if you had a magic wand, how would you fix this? Because chances are that they've thought it out to that point. If they haven't, then the subject of the next one-on-one is, bring me some solutions, or do you think we need a team meeting on this? And empower them to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So when it all comes down to it, we need to remove as many of these hiccups to production and movement and momentum that we can, because we all know, as hard as we try, there's going to be outside forces working on us as far as, getting the right parts on time, getting bad parts, having parts break and having to do warranty, boxed wrong, whatever it might be. We've all been there. We've all seen that, right? I had a service advisor in a collision shop tell me they got a brand new grill from their GM dealer, and when they opened it up, it was cracked literally in half. And now they've got to reorder it and wait to get the customer in until they get a new one. So was that the shop's fault? Absolutely not. Should they be clear and transparent with their customer? Hey, we ordered the part, it got here today, it's damaged, we can't put it on, we need to reschedule you. Absolutely. And on the customer side, that might be frustrating, that might be challenging. They may have already made all these arrangements, and we have to be understanding that they might be frustrated, even angry, even though they know it's not our fault. We're the messenger, and we might be the one who takes the shot for it. And then that advisor's got to shake that off and step back into the flow and be like, okay, that was a mess and I've got it fixed, but that interaction with the customer was not great and I'm not happy about it. So they have to shake that off and move forward. And an owner has to do the same thing, as does a tech. If a tech gets their butt kicked around the shop by a vehicle, they've got to take a deep breath, reset, and take the next one clean, in clean energy and temperament, so that they're not carrying some kind of static into that engagement with that vehicle with them. So, finding ways to refresh, showing your team how to, let things go, how to reset their experience so that the next thing they touch isn't with baggage drug into this experience. So, again, shop owners have a lot of responsibility to be leaders for their team and to give them these tools to overcome their challenges. We can't just, as owners, put our hands over our eyes and be like, well, they're grown adults, they just need to figure it out. We need to be observant. We need to be watching them. We need to have them in these one-on-ones and be like, hey, Joe, hey, Bob, I saw this happen in the shop. Talk to me about this. What was going on? How can we help you not have this problem? Or can we help you find a coping mechanism to let the challenge of this previous job go and come into the next one clean? And a lot of people aren't there. Even as shop owners, sometimes it's hard. Maybe we're having a bad day. Maybe something happened outside of the shop and we bring it into the shop with us. And in that case, then we need a coach, we need a friend, we need somebody that we can offload that to, so we're not bringing the static into the shop environment. And we all know it's no fun to listen to a radio when there's static, it's breaking up, or on your cell phone when you're like in a bad service area and you're getting every third word and it's like, and you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? So we need to take the static out. So we can do that by having clear delineations of whose responsibility is what, holding those people accountable, even if it's ourselves, and we've got to be honest with ourselves, right? Have I been keeping up with my marketing people? Have I looked at, our calls? Have I listened to calls that my advisors are making? Have I been responding to our Google reviews? Am I engaging with Google to keep our Google rating up? There's all kinds of ways that we as owners have to be responsible and look in the mirror and be like, yep, I messed that one up. And it's okay to tell your team, come here, guys, I got to talk to you. Hey, this is on me. I screwed up. My bad. This is what I'm going to do to fix it. And in the meantime, this is what you guys can do to help. Those moments where you show your vulnerability as a leader will help them understand, A, you're not perfect, that you are taking responsibility and accountability for your role for things in the shop. And that way, when you ask them for accountability and responsibility, you've modeled that as a leader. So please, as you're moving through your day, through your week, through your month, be there for your people, be there for yourself, and understand how this whole system works together. But because we can't ask a technician to fix car count, we can't ask ourselves, as owners, to fix that car faster or better or with more quality. We have to let the responsibility land where it needs to and then hold that layer accountable. So, just to wrap up, I want to thank you all. This industry is not easy, but there's ways that we can make it easier, where we can guide our people, where we can give them good processes, where we can include them in revising those processes to make it better, take some of the stress off, keep things moving, right? Keep things rolling, keep things in an orderly fashion. And as always, it's your shop. It should be your way, right? So, but your way should be with more ease, hopefully less static, more signal, and a team that's moving together in a unified way. So I wish you all the best. I wish you all to enjoy the work that we do and find ways to make it more fun. So that's my shop talk her way, and you guys can go out and make your shop your way. Thank you again so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share as much as you possibly can. Your loyalty in listening, watching, however you engage with us is really means the world to me. If you have any questions, have any feedback, please don't hesitate to comment wherever you see the podcast. I love to see your comments and hear what you're thinking, and it helps me to find more topics for later conversations, and we might even get you on to talk about something that you do in your shop. So as always, thank you so much. Go out there and love your people till it's weird, and until next time, this is JeanAnn SaintGrace with Shop Talk Her Way.